There's the concept of grace, there's the concept of law, there's the concept of commandment and mercy and obligation and responsibility and privilege. And it's like, are these contrasting doctrines, or are they all the same? The Torah, which was given to Israel as a collective of the 12 tribes, and then, of course, Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and Yaakov, when he was giving the blessings, he said, these two are mine. It makes it essentially 13 tribes. Ephraim and Manasseh were each a tribe. The point is, Israel was given the Torah as a gift, as being Yahweh's own. And I've got a number of Bible verses out of the Scripture which I'll try to give you today to look up and regard this matter. And for the record, Israel decided that it didn't want those instructions, which were privileges as being Yahweh's unique people. And so because Israel threw away the covenant because it said, hey, what are the other kids having? We'll have some of that. We'd rather have what the other kids are having. Now, there's a few verses that I have here, if we can get to them tonight, where Yahweh says, I can't let you be with the other children. It's like, what? I don't remember reading that verse. Well, this is in the Stone's Tanakh translation. I'm not sure how it reads in King James. I didn't look it up. But there's things where Yahweh says, Ephraim is my firstborn. Israel is my very own son. And we think, oh, well, wait a minute, Jesus Christ, he's the only begotten Son of God. Well, the things we have learned from Christian teachings, or perhaps rabbinical teachings, if you go back and you read it for yourself from the original Hebrew, you'll see different things. And again, I'm not here to contend with Christian doctrine or rabbinical Judaism. I'm trying to give you a mechanism for looking at the actual words which are written, inscribed in the Torah, so that you can decipher what they mean for yourself. And there's some astounding things written which you'll never see if you don't do this work for yourself. There's such little time here for me to show you all the stuff I can find. I'm just trying to show you what's in this letter Gimmel tonight. But it's like, I've got like 10 hours worth of material here. I could show you all about this Gimmel, and it's like, there's no venue to do that other than say, let me show you that there's stuff in the Gimmel. And so if you use the Red Dictionary, hopefully my chart is helpful to expand your thinking on what it means, and these tapes will kind of give you more substance to show you that there's something worth finding, but you'll go find it yourself. So the point is, Israel was a chosen people and given privileges, and the privileges were also, I believe, embedded in the commandments. And when Israel threw away the commandments, they threw away the privileges. They threw away the legal contract that they had with Yahweh, where Yahweh said, if you keep my word, then this is what I will do for you. And if you don't keep my word, then this is what will happen to you. And if you read in Deuteronomy chapters 28 through 30, it expresses it very clear. There's plenty of other places that tell you also very clearly what's going to happen. And then you see things like the Russian pogroms and the Holocaust and the Inquisition and horrible, inhumane, the worst atrocities on the face of the earth. And you'll say, why did this happen? And it's like, Yahweh said it would happen. And there's a verse where Yahweh says, when you see these happen, then you'll remember, it was not for nothing that I gave you these instructions and told you to keep them, because this is a legal contract. If, it's a big word, if you keep these words as of my instructions, then this is what I will do for you. I will protect you. I will chase away your enemies. I'll send the hornets after them. I'll give you the rain in the season, make your crops flourish, and your animal herds, and your own families, your children, your offspring. And if you don't, then here's a whole list of the atrocities that will happen, and even that will come upon the earth, and even that will come upon the other nations of the earth. But there are very many scriptures that say, in the later days, the days that come achrim, it's also the word for other, or that which comes in the far distant future. If, he says, if my people Israel will return to the covenant, then I will return all the blessings upon them that I gave to their forefathers, that their forefathers cast off. And you could say, well, the covenant of grace is that we don't have to do anything. I would disagree. The covenant of grace says you're allowed to come back because your punishment for what you did by turning away has been paid for, covered, hence the crucifixion of Yeshua and the chastisement of the people of Israel for all these years. What do we get to come back to? The privileges, which are also responsibilities, which are also obligations, which are also called the commandments of the covenant. And if we come back to simply do what he said to do, there's all kinds of things available for us. But if we say there's no law, there's no covenant, there's no commandments, what we don't know because we haven't been told, but what we're also saying is because we choose to be under no obligation to regard Yahweh's business, he is off the hook and has no obligation to do anything for us. And he even says, you plug your ears when I speak, I will plug my ears when you scream. These are very serious matters. There's a particular verse, Deuteronomy 27:8. It says in English, you shall inscribe on these stones, right? They set up stones and they inscribed, they cut, they carved into, engraved the words of this Torah well clarified. You can say, okay, that's just an instruction. Well, the interesting thing to show you kind of the ABCs in Hebrew, the Aleph is the plan. That's the Torah. Okay? To inscribe on these stones is to give the heart of the Torah, the expression of the Almighty, a form. That's putting it into a bet form. I was saying last week that the bet is actually the Aleph bet. It's also his house. It's also Israel. It's also the materialization of the cosmological universe, matter. And when he says, you shall inscribe, that's the verb, the action of writing, which is Gimmel. Gimmel is a verb. Gimmel is an action. Gimmel is to put something into motion. In which you could say, well, then, this is kind of the ABCs of the Hebrew alphabet. You shall inscribe, Gimmel, the words of the... what you shall inscribe on these stones, all the words of this Torah, and then well clarified, you might say, well, that's kind of like in the Dalet position. The thing about the Dalet, see, here's the point about the alphabet, is that the Aleph is silent, but it describes itself in all the other letters. The bet is in the Aleph. The bet isn't another thing other than the Aleph. The bet is the expression in form of the Aleph, which is the silent, unformed. But the Gimmel is in the bet. So the Gimmel is the bet in motion, or the Gimmel, the bet means in, and the Gimmel extends out from the bet. So in the modern form, the Gimmel is shaped like this, and out from the middle, it has this other extension. Well, they say, well, that's a foot. In Greek, the letter gamma is shaped like this, and it has this thing coming out of it. It's the expression out from the middle. So if you have an aleph and a bet, you could say, well, the aleph is expressed in bet, and then the bet expresses in itself as in the Gimmel. But there's another connection between these letters, which is the third letter. Also, what I found is that it describes actually the relationship between the aleph and the bet. I'm standing in your way there. So you could say, well, here the Gimmel comes out of the middle, you might say between the aleph and the bet, one way to look at it. But it's also an extension of aleph through bet into Gimmel. There's different ways to see it. So as we talked last week, the shape of the bet has this is like the mind, the inner personal, and this expression of the mind through the hand is the outer social. So the hand, is why sometimes people talk with their hands, is that the hands are used to express what's going on inside, latently, you might say, in a manifest way. That's why people express these things, because your hand is keyed to your brain in terms of a way of communication. So the bet is actually kind of a picture of that. So what's going on in the personal zone is expressed into the evident, manifest, social zone. And Gimmel, then, being and the aspect of that expression. So, to say well clarified comes after the Gimmel. So for us to address the Dalet a bit, in talking about the Gimmel, is to say, in Hebrew, you have three-letter verb roots. The letters always work in groups of threes. Now, I'm trying to show you how to break it down into one-letter groups and use the dictionary to look at two-letter groups, but it's essentially a structure of three-letter groups. And so if you look at the Dalet, the Gimmel, you'll really see what the Gimmel means if you know what the Dalet is and if you know what the Bet is, both of which are expressions of the Aleph. And also the Dalet says something about what's in between the Bet and the Gimmel. That's a little bit more of an extension, but let me explain this. Each, as the letters get more and more specific, they're going to get more and more complex. And so if the Aleph is one, echad, unified, and the Aleph decides to make two, a binary distinction, Bet is two, and then say, well, what's between the Aleph and the Bet? Is there a space or are they tethered? The concept of there being either a space, a distant break, or tethered, which is to say attached or disattached, is a binary distinction. That's Bet. So in Bet is not just an object or the concept of number two, a multiplication, a plurality, but also it sets up this binary distinction of saying you can be of or not of. You can be either in the house or out of the house. It sets up a fundamental duality for everything else in the universe. So you'll end up with life versus death, light versus dark, a choice. Well, then you go back to the Dalet and say, well, if the Gimmel is being sent or the Bet in motion, what has that got to do with Dalet? Well, both the Dalet is in the Gimmel and the Gimmel is in the Bet, then that means they're an expression of the duality of the Bet, which is to say, if you come to a fork in the road, here's your road, and you come to a fork. You can go to the right-hand side or the left-hand side. You're at a threshold, right or left. When you see a door, you can say, well, there's the door. Do I stay in this room or go to the other room? Do I stay inside or go to the outside? It's a choice. When you're facing a Dalet, a threshold, it's a choice. So the Gimmel in motion now has options, choices. So the Bet is this inner, outer, in, personal, out, social, and we mentioned the Shema, which says you will think of these things when you lie down. That's the personal inside your mind space. When you get up, that's the social expression. You will write them on the doorposts of your house. That's the close quarters. And on your gates, that's going out, addressing the world. Teach them to you'll think of them and you will teach them to your children. Personal, outer expression. So what we're trying to do here is not to be confusing, but it's to say, this is the design that Yahweh planned. And so because there's now this dual expression, what is the Gimmel? Well, there's two expressions of the Gimmel then. You could say it's the personal expression, because even the Aleph, as an identity and an intention, Aleph as a prefix can mean I am or I will. But it's all about the self. And then so the Bet is the self, the one, the echad, becoming two, which is an other, which now has the option of an adversary, an enemy, a contradiction. So now that contradiction can choose to either come back to the Aleph or move away from the Aleph. A choice, a Dalet, either this side or that side. So then you get to the Vav man, and Daniel chapter 12, held up his right hand and his left hand to the heavens. You swore by him who lives forever. The point is, you've got a choice, this side or that side, blessing or cursing. He didn't change the covenant. The covenant was broken. So what he did is he modified the terms. He said, the soul that sins shall die. But the understanding that I see in the scriptures is that the provision made so that we don't have to die for our sin, the vision of the sent one, the Gimmeled one, who is the Vav man slain. Behold, hey, look, he's the Vav, the man who was cut off, Zioned, but he's the perfect one of 7. Like this Shabbat is the one day out of the week that's cut off and separated. So Zion, going back to the letter G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, there's a cutting off before you get to the next H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. So when we realize that this message is embedded in these first 8 letters, the plan to build a house, give the house the option of drifting away or to be tethered and come back, that's the Gimmel aspect of what's between the Aleph and the Bet, the umbilical cord, the tether. But furthermore, the Gimmel is the letter with a foot. So in esoteric writings of the flame letters, various Jewish authors have written that the Gimmel is the letter that's quick to run and give. And the Dalet is the poor letter. It's got its back turned to the Gimmel. So in modern writing, here's a Gimmel shaped like this, and it's a letter with a foot, and the Dalet's shaped like this, and it's kind of got its back toward the Gimmel. And they say, or one author had said, but the Dalet is very poor, and it's needy, so it kind of has its hand out to receive from the Gimmel. It doesn't want to say, oh yeah, give me, but it has to receive. And you could say, well, how can you remember that Gimmel means to give? Well, the word Gimmel Mem, a 2-letter root, in Paleo you'll have the Gimmel Mem, Gam, is literally a mound or a pile. It's like the back hump of the camel, that which is piled up, which is full of resources. And it also means to suck up water like a straw. So the word papyrus, or a reed that sucks up water, is the same word. So you could say, well, the provisions of sucking up provisions in the back of the camel to then transport and use and dispense to another location, these are all Gimmel concepts, Gimmel pictures. So when you go to the gas station in your car is a gimmeling object, right? It's like your camel that you transport with. But when you go to the gas station and they take that hose and put the nozzle in your tank and fill you up from their resources, that's also a picture of Gimmel. You then are in the Dalet position, even though your car is a Gimmel, receiving the provisions from the gas station as you're getting filled up. So this image of the foot being a Gimmel is not just a foot. It's an extension of that which will then give from its own insides. Hence your offspring, through the vehicle of, like in this Greek form of the gamma, from this body, there's this extension which gives. So you could say, well, who's Israel? Israel is the house, according to Scripture, that Yahweh made to give of himself to also inhabit. What's the Torah? The Torah itself is Yahweh's personal expression which describes him, which he inhabits, because it's a living word. And according to the Gospel of John 1:1, the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. It came to inhabit. He formed himself into such a extension. There's another word. Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. Well, we think, oh, footstool. That's an object. The earth is this object out there. But if you look at that word for footstool, it means to stretch out. It's the place where you stretch out your feet. So we think, oh, sitting in your lazy boy chair, you put your feet up on a footstool. It doesn't say footstool. It says the place where you stretch out your foot. If the Creator, well, first of all, you have to go back to before the letters of the alphabet to show you the way I'm trying to show you the way the whole picture fits together. The Ein Sof. The word Ein, trying to go to some little details here to keep these connections alive in your thinking. In English, we have the slang word ain't, right? A-I-N-T. That means without, right? Ain't got nothing. The word ein is the Hebrew word without. Tav, if you look at T, is the Tav, that's agreement, or the sign of the covenant. Ain't is really, we ain't got no agreement here. Ein Tav, no sign of the covenant or the contract. Soph, Samik Vav Pei, is the root of the word for sofa, which is the piece of furniture which collects everything. It's the word for Yosef, which is simply that would be Yod Vav Samik Pei, but we talked about that a little bit later, which means he will accumulate. Joseph was put in the position of accumulating all the resources in Egypt and dispensing them to his family. So, but this word here, soph, in this form, basically means limit. So, because each word also means its opposite, and each letter so too. To accumulate, which is to say, gosh, there's no limit, but also to say, no, there is a limit. Or how much do you accumulate? How much does Joseph in the position of saying, you can have this much, and he was the dispenser of the benefits. It also means threshold. It also means goblet. In the name Yosef, where all these things, he was saying, come to my threshold, and I will dispense with my goblet the amount that I'm going to give you. And all these things are embedded in Hebrew that you just don't see in English. So the Ein Sof, the one without limit, determined to give us the understanding of who he was by imposing upon himself the limit of the Hebrew Aleph Bet. 22 points of distinction and also dimension. So each one of the letters, the 22 letters of the Hebrew Aleph Bet, are dimensions. But if you know about geometry, a point is infinitely small. So it's a single point. Each letter is like a single point compared to the Ein Sof without limit. But he determined these 22 ways to reckon with him. But each one of them is like an entire dimension, which is why on the chart, the top section of the chart says, when you realize that each letter is a dimension or a point of view or an aspect of rendering the entire universe, then you realize he gave us 22 dimensions or 22 points of view. You could say, well, like here, for example, if you have a camera up there looking at this room, that's a point of view. If you have a camera from my point of view, it looks different than a camera from your point of view, or the camera from over there, different points of view regarding the universe. So he determined 22 points of view from which we could apprehend the part of him he chose to reveal. Of course, the Ein Sof without limit, it's much bigger than the 22 points. And perhaps when we see him face to face, he'll expand our consciousness to apprehend more of himself. But he gave us these 22. So from these 22, which are simply like little points that we can draw a picture with, connecting the dots, which is the word sefer, connecting the dots, we can also then say from each point is a perspective, so you get 22 points of view regarding the 22 points of view, which is what the top section of the chart is. Briefly, that's what that is. So the Ein Sof, Aleph, determined this plan, which I just described. And then he put it into Bet, into the material cosmos, so that everything in nature, the heavens declare the glory of Elohim. It's the glory of Elohim to hide a matter. It's the glory of kings to discover a matter. But see, the word king, look in the Red Dictionary, is the word melech, is not just a king. It's one who takes counsel. But read that differently. It's the glory of one who takes counsel to discover a matter. Takes counsel on what? On how to receive the blessing instead of the curse, which is why he gave it to Israel, to show the world how to get the blessing instead of the curse. All these things tie together. I'm trying to show you this smattering. So he put it into the cosmos. If you can read it, the more we know about studying the cosmos, the more we see about the mystery of what he made. Gimmel, he then set it in motion. So if we can know how to read the motion of things, we should be able to see his glory, his kavod, his secrets, his self-expression, but also in the sent one. So as the song was saying, he sent his prophets. I've got numerous verses we can address where he says, I sent you my messengers. An angel is the word malak, very similar to a melech, a king, only there's a letter aleph in between, and aleph is the plan or something set in motion, like sending down that bowling ball or sending the ox in motion. So to take the one who would receive counsel, or the one who was given the counsel or given the message to give to the one who would take counsel and send him on a mission, is a malak, which is an angel, which is a gimmel. So a prophet is a gimmel. A teacher is a gimmel. One who would receive, in the Dalet position, has to receive through the act of gimmeling, like it being at the service station getting your tank filled up. So when you see this gimmel, it's not only action, movement, transportation, but it's actually the sent one. Yeshua, as a play on words, sent the guy who he healed his eyes of blindness to the pool of Siloam. Well, if you look up in Strong's Concordance, the word Siloam isn't really a word. It comes from shellac, where we get the word shellac. And when you shellac or varnish, you paint it out on the table, and you spread out, and you send the varnish or the paint that direction and send it. That's gimmeling, but it's the word shellac, and it's the word shellac, which is what the word Siloam comes from, which means one sent. He sent him to the pool of one sent by the authority of the sent one. It's all these play on words. So to say, well, how do we know that Yeshua is the sent one? It's simple. Now, who do I mean by Yeshua? This is getting off onto a tangent. So when we were at the week of the letter Aleph, I tried to show you how, like the concept of the Crazy 8 game, if you lay down 4 diamonds, you can either lay down another 4 or you can lay down another diamond. People call it rabbi trails or rabbit trails, but the point is, every one of these are legal connections. And I'm trying to show you where some of these go to show you that to try to stay on a track of a one-by-one step is almost impossible. It's a Greek linear way of thinking, Greco-Roman, you might say, Western way of thinking, and it would not do you justice to contribute or patronize that way of thinking. So I'm trying to intentionally get you out of that rut. Hebrew is very cyclical, hence you have the 7 days, you have got the festivals, the word hallelujah, you got these 2 lameds in the modern lamed, shaped like this, is almost a corkscrew shape. You got the other lamed in paleo shaped like that, which is like this turning, which is also the opposite of the Gimmel. So here it sounds like I'm spinning around, but I'm trying to make a point. Gimmel and lamed in paleo, written like this, more specifically, you might write it like that, literally means to roll. And it's anything round. It's a head. It's a skull. It's a revolving door. What comes around goes around. What goes around comes around. I remember talking to a friend years ago, and he says, what goes around comes around, and what comes around goes around. It's half a dozen one and 6 of the other. That's not true. Because there's a spiritual principle which Yahweh has told us in his word. What comes around doesn't have to go around. If somebody does something to you and you send it on, that's your choice, and you will get the blessing or the cursing on account of it. But what goes around, what you send out, and that's going to come back around, well, that's a law. He says, with the measure you used, it will be measured to you. Blessing for blessing, cursing for cursing, forgiveness for forgiveness, which is why when he gives, he says, the way you treat my word is what's going to happen to you. And all through the Old Testament scriptures, we see it playing true. He says, if you despise my word and reject my word, you will be despised and rejected. And that happened in abundance. I could show you many places. When Yeshua came, what did he accomplish? He was despised and rejected, but he was the Word made flesh. So what they did to him was a picture of what they had already done to the Word. And if we, on account of him, continue to reject the Word under the auspices of grace, we're doing the same thing to the Word that was done to him. Ripped the letter Zion, the letter G, the discs that rip it open and do away with it, and say, because of grace, we can now err with license. We can sin. We can break the Torah. We can say it's meaningless. The law is whatever we do to him and his word is what's going to be done to us. So if we receive Yeshua in truth, we are receiving the Torah in the truth, and we will receive the blessings on account of our responsible recognition and observance of the truth. But if we reject the sent one, we will get what's coming to us, because that's the legal contract. This is all about going back and reading the legal contract. I would maintain that there are those in the world, past, present, maybe future, maybe they're demons and devils, perhaps Yahweh himself, who don't or haven't wanted Israel to know what the truth is for many years. I could prove that, but that's another discussion. The point is, Yahweh said, because you have scorned my words and spit them, chewed them up and spit them out of your mouth, sorry guys, but that's what's going to happen to you. That's the contract. You will be chewed up and spit out. Because you have ruined my house, my bet, my stuff, my covenant, you, Israel, will be ruined by your neighbors. And if you think, and this is all through the book of Hosea, if you think, oh, it's your neighbors, the ones you've been doing trading and commerce with, that have given you your resources and your goods and your provisions, it was me, Yahweh says, all along. And to prove it to you, I'm going to make your neighbors hate you, loathe you, and hold you in contempt and disgust, because that's the expression of what you've done to me. You have hated me, loathed me, held me in contempt and disgust, my words, my instructions, and so your neighbors are going to do the same thing to you that you guys have done to me. You see this boomerang effect? Guess what? The shape of the paleo Gimmel is a boomerang. It's exactly what it means. The shape of the paleo letter Gimmel is like the head and neck of the camel. The camel, the modern Hebrew, the letter with the foot. But it's also, in its primitive form, the boomerang. You send it out, and it comes back. It's the shape of the Gimmel Lamed, which if you look up in the Red Dictionary, there's quite a few words that start with Gimmel Lamed, which are the revolving door, the round thing that rolls, a sphere, a bowl, the planet Earth. You go east, you end up in the west. You go north, you end up in the south. You can't get off it. Everything's around and around. The Gimmel and the Lamed. It's that which goes out this way is going to come back that way. It's the same story of what the covenant of Israel is all about. Because, see, fundamentally, there's the Aleph, that's the plan, which has to be expressed in Bet, which is the duality, the binary, the 1 and the 0, just two options, this or that. The Dalit decision, life or death, light or dark, wickedness or righteousness, accept or reject, you're in the house or you're out of the house. And it's even expressed as a polarity, a binary, in the letter Gimmel. See, all these letters are in all the other letters, which is what the chart is trying to describe. In each letter is all the other letters. And from the vantage point of every letter, you can see all the other letters. So if I say, well, it's this and it's that, well, is that Bet or is that Gimmel? If there's two options, it goes this way and comes back, is that Bet? It's Bet in motion. It's the two choices. You can choose to reject and get rejected, or you can choose to be part of and get received. And Yahweh all through, he says, because you have hated me, I will express my hatred to you. And he has some very hurt and venomous tones to describe what he was going to do to Israel. But he also says, but Ephraim is my son. Can I reject you forever? Can I actually hate you? Can I actually destroy you? No, it's impossible. But there's terms of coming back. And the terms of coming back, like the song was saying, is teshuvah. Not returning because, it's the law, we have to. It's returning out of love. The expression of our heart. Because it's a privilege to return to his home. It's an obligation, but with the obligation, like you better do this, it's a responsibility. You will now be held accountable for how we deal with this, but it's an incredible opportunity of a privilege. And we have not, at least me, from a Christian point of view, from the historical last couple thousand years of the Western way of thinking of the world, it has never been described as a privilege. And we were told it was done away with. We were told we were under grace, so we don't have to. Well, I'll tell you, Yahweh said, because you've rejected my ways, I'm going to send you a delusion, and you will forget my words. I'm going to take my words right out of your mouth, and I'm going to send you the lie that you preferred. I'm going to send you distortion, which you preferred because you didn't want the straight truth. So that when I say Yeshua, somebody who has been raised to believe in Judaism might say, hey, is that Jesus Christ guy? Wait, now it's a question of identity, of character. there may be some distinctions that we're not ready for. You see, if this one is the sent one and I say Yeshua, and it's like, is that the guy that was born 2,000 years ago? Well, who is Yeshua? Let's look at the spelling of his name. If you say his name is spelled Yod, Hey, well, Yod is the hand of the Creator. Hey is the expression of the Creator. Well, what was the creator of what? The creator of the heavens and the earth. It's the hand that works. This is why you have to know what the letters mean, and if you know them in their sequence, it's easier to see what they mean. What is hey? It means, hey, look. Hey, it's an expression. Here, let me show you the way it is. What is the Torah? The expression of the Creator to his people, his bet, his house Israel, of how to get the blessing and what to do to not get the curse. It's his expression of love saying, let me show you the way this place works. It's like taking a class in chemistry, mathematics, and physics, and him saying, let me show you how I made this place. That's what the Torah is. This is how you get the blessing and stay away from the curse. That's what we're talking about, because the message is embedded in the Hebrew alphabet, and if we learn this alphabet, we'll see how to get the blessing and get out of this curse we've been stuck in for all these years. Vav, Yod He Vav. Well, what is Vav? Well, you could say, well, Vav is a man, but it's also a hook. It's also a nail, or that which attaches, which is essentially a bridge across a chasm from one side to the other side. Well, the word Yod He, if you look up in the Red Dictionary, it literally means to exist. Well, who's the Creator who revealed himself? He says, I'm the one who caused this place to exist, and I'm now He expressing to you what I made, which is what exists. So Yod He Yah, as it's pronounced, literally means this is what is. This is what it is. Vav, now we're connecting to Shin Ayin. So it's pronounced Yahusha, or sometimes it's Yahushua, but if there's a dot here between the Shin and the modern, it's the U phonetic, but in Paleo, there's no regard of dots of vowels. So if you're just going to pronounce it, it might be Yahusha or Yahosha, but the word Shin Ayin, if you look at the Red Dictionary, you'll see that it means help, redeem, deliver, save. So it's like, who is Yahusha? The saving help of redemption and deliverance, bridging that has been sent from the Creator himself. So now we have to say, who is this guy Jesus Christ and who is this guy Yeshua? That's another discussion, but I'm trying to show you where this goes. We have got 10 minutes here. Now, if you look up in the dictionary and you find a whole bunch of different words with these two letters, it always has to do with saving and helping. As a matter of fact, if you put the letter Vav in here, Yeshua, it's a cry for help. Yahweh, help us, save us, deliver us. If you say Yeshua, that's actually what you're saying. Yahweh, save us, deliver us, help us. That's the word Yeshua. Would it be wrong then for anybody, Jewish, rabbinical, or otherwise, who studies Hebrew to say, when we cry Yeshua, and he sends us Yahusha, shouldn't that be the name of the deliverer? Because after all, in Hebrew, the names of people and of locations are embodiments of who their disposition and character really is. Hence, the alphabet itself is the embodiment and the character and the disposition of the Shem, the name, which according to the Red Dictionary also means name, fame, reputation, renown, the occupation that you're concerned with. The Hebrew alphabet contains all of the Creator's revelation of himself. In fact, the fact that he's the Creator is only one little aspect of the Ein Sof. The Ein Sof without limit chose to impose upon himself the limit that we think of him as the Creator. I'll show you another little trick of how this works. When Moshe in Exodus chapter 3 says, he's at the burning bush and he says, what is your name? Who should I say sent me when I go to speak to the leaders of Israel in captivity in Egypt and say, well, the Almighty, the Creator, the big guy, he sent me. And they say, what's his name? what am I going to tell him? He didn't say Yahweh. What he said was Aleph, Hey, Yod, Hey. And then the word Asher, which is Aleph, Shin, Resh. And then he repeated again, Aleph, Hey, Yod, Hey. And it's pronounced Eya, Asher, Eya, or Aya, Asher, Aya. And you say, well, it's translated, I am that I am, or I will be what I will be. And you can say, well, how do you get that out of this? Well, here, look. If the Aleph is the plan, like the omnipotent, eternal one, before the creation of the world, so he's the author, he's the architect, he's the administrator, he's the artist. All those words start with A, as we discussed before. The one who initiates, who thought up and initiate the plan and has the A, authority, because he set this thing in motion. That's the Aleph. Hey, he has chosen to reveal himself. Aleph, like Ein Sof, the one without limit, who determined this limit, chose to reveal himself as Yod, the creator, who then revealed himself in his Torah. So if you know how to read Ehyeh, it means, the Ein Sof, the guy who made this whole place, who revealed himself with the limitation of being the creator and the one who expressed to us the Torah. Well, that implies that the creator is just one little aspect of the one we're really dealing with. Because the creator of this planet is simply expressed in the Yod. I'm the creator. Now there's all these other aspects. When we think of, at least for me, before I realized this, when I think of the creator, it's like, oh, that's the biggest concept I can possibly have. It's like, no, that's just one of the 22. When you look at this, and then you say, well, what is this Shin Ayin? Well, Shin is the monogram of El Shaddai. It's the same sound. Shin, it's the phonetic SH. El Shaddai. Well, what does El Shaddai mean? The one who, as we discussed last week, if you write it in Shaddai, Shin, Dalet, Yod. If you regard the Shin as a prefix, so it simply says Shaddai, and it's translated Almighty. So if somebody says El Shaddai, you go, oh yeah, the Almighty. There's more to it. If the Shin is a prefix, it means who, that, or which. It's virtually the same word as Asher, though Asher means blessed or happy. So Asher means whoever wants to be blessed or happy, or that which it's a connection with one who would be blessed. But it's the same meaning as the letter Shin as a prefix. Happens to have the letter Shin at the heart. Who, that, which, and die means enough. So when you say die, enough, stop, okay. When you die, your life is over. You've had enough, that's the end. The one who can stop this planet. Yeshua said, I'm the beginning and I'm the end. John in chapter 1 through 5 of Revelation claims that the one he sees dressed in white linen is El Shaddai. The first and the last, the Aleph and the Tav. The one who says enough. But if you read Shin Dalet as the word, and this being the suffix, the Yod at the end means my, and Shin Dalet is a female breast, which is to say that which provides. Well, that's the Aleph, the one that provides. And the one who stops Dalet Yod is the Tav. There's the Aleph Tav embedded in the word Shaddai. So part of this is to say, how do you decipher all these words? So if here is the Shin, the monogram of El Shaddai, and Ayin is the letter which speaks of wisdom and knowledge and understanding, it has to do with, according to the Mishkan pattern, lining up with Yom Kippur, which is Judgment Day. You've got a table of showbread according to the Mishkan pattern with piles of bread. The bread is panim. It's the same word for faces. What happens on Judgment Day? All your masks, your faces are taken off and revealed. It lines up with day 5. Fish in the sea, birds in the air. You might say, like, gee, there's that picture of heaven and hell, tipping the scales. And Yeshua said, with the measure you used, it will be measured to you. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. And he also says, the scariest verses in the entire Bible, a bunch of people on that day are going to say, Lord, Lord, we've done wonderful things in your name. We expect to get paid now. And he says, I never knew you, you workers of iniquity. The word iniquity in Greek, because this is the New Testament, is anomio, and it means without the law. He certainly was not talking about man's law. He was talking about his law. Which law? The Torah law that the Creator expressed. You who thought That my law was done away with? That I just didn't care anymore? I'll show you how much I care. Look what they did to Yeshua. See that? That's how much I care. See the ripping open of his back? Look at the Holocaust. Look at the Inquisition. See the ripping apart of Israel? That's how much I care. I told you that this was going to happen if you didn't keep my words. I told you that it would not happen if you did keep my words. I told you to regard my words because they are my gift, my very best. He says in another place in Isaiah, he says, he's speaking to Cyrus, who wasn't even born yet. He said, there is no other God, I'm the only one, but the words are Ein Od Zulti, Ein Elohim. And you go, I don't speak Hebrew, I don't know what that means. The word Zulti basically means there is no other. But he says, but if you break down the word to make it quick, we've only got a minute left here before the break. There is no other power. The word Od, Ein Vav Dalet, Ein Od, Ein Dalet is a witness, a testimony. To say it again and again and again, he says, I've given you the very best. There is no other Elohim. Elohim may be another God, but there is no other power or strength. I gave Israel the best I had, and you come to me and you want another gospel? You want another message of what kind of grace? I'm telling you, I gave you my best, and you cast it off as dung. That's the word Zulti. Cast away, saying, we don't want this stuff. We chewed it up and spit it out. Come on, give us something better. Give us a law where there is no law. Well, the law is, if you say there is no law, you've got no covering, because you've got no covenant, which means he is under no obligation to give us anything. And he says, to the wicked, he says, and it's these same words, it's I believe it's Reshi and I in the Reshi and Sin in the word for wicked. To the wicked, he says, who are you to take up my covenant in your mouth when you have cast my words behind you? Oh, we don't need this more. They were done away with. This is very serious business. The stuff we're talking about, which we'll talk about right after this break, is coming back to the promises of salvation, restoration, and deliverance from the world empires that have tyrannized and destroyed the people of Israel.